Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Veg Grower Podcast. My name's Richard and I want to encourage and inspire you to grow more of your own food in whatever space you have available. And I do this by showing exactly what's been going on in my own allotment and my own kitchen garden here in Littlehampton on the south coast of the UK. And I've been growing my own for nearly 30 years now, but I still learn something new every single day. Now, first of all, I hope you have had a very Merry Christmas or whatever you may be celebrating. It was certainly a good one here at the Veg Grower Podcast HQ. This is the last episode for 2025. Next week we will be into 2026, but I always like to spend a bit of time just analysing what's been going on in the kitchen garden and the allotment over this year. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. So, come join me in the kitchen garden and we will start. Well, here I am in the kitchen garden. Now, over this last week, we have spent a bit of time in the kitchen garden. One of the great advantages with being able to have a garden literally outside your back door is that even when I'm busy, I can just run out for a few minutes and tackle a few things that I might want to do. That's included just doing a bit of weeding, a bit of general tidying and mulching, all the usual jobs that we tend to talk about at this time of year. I've even managed to sow some of our onion seeds. Traditionally, Boxing Day is when onion seeds will be sown for exhibition growing. So we've been sowing a few onion seeds in order to get those growing and started. So looking forward to seeing how they perform. But I am reviewing 2025 and I've got to say the kitchen garden really has came on leaps and bounds. When I look back at what we started with, now we started 2025 with a lot of promise and the kitchen garden certainly delivered. We had added the AutoPot system in the greenhouse, which was an absolutely amazing investment, I have to say. The greenhouse has performed with lots of cucumbers, lots of tomatoes for very minimal work, and that was certainly something that I have really taken on pot. Now, if you don't know what the AutoPot system, we actually do have an affiliate code if you do want to buy them. But basically, it's an irrigation system. You have a reservoir of water that pipes water off to some pots. Plants control how much water they want. It really has worked, and we have really done well in the greenhouse with producing lots and lots of different fruits and vegetables. So really, really pleased with that. Out in the main garden, we of course have added some new beds over this year and they have really paid off. We've been growing asparagus, we've been growing rhubarb as our perennials, which we've grown from seed in previous years. Added to that, all the other vegetables that we've grown in all the other beds. We've actually really done quite well with all the vegetables, constantly bringing in food, constantly planting food out. Really has been quite a pleasure. Now, when I was reflecting on this last year, one of the things that I realised back in January, I ended up walking out of my day job one day and I didn't realise just how my mental health had been affected by my day job. I know that's always something that you hear people say, but it's not until I look back now that I realised that why I walked out was a whole wide range of reasons, and there was a final straw. I won't get into details, but let's just say a lot of it was boredom. However, the kitchen garden at that time, when I walked out, I came out in the kitchen garden and I just concentrated on working, doing things in the kitchen garden that got me through that period, and I pretty quickly found a new job which has lent itself really nicely to continuing with this podcast. Anyway, what I realised is the value of the kitchen garden isn't just the food. It isn't just being out in the fresh air. It's the good it does for our mental health. And this year it really has came into play because there has been a few more things that have been going on. Obviously, as I said, I walked out of my job in January, started a new job in March, and I basically had February off. But the other area where my mental health was affected, we had a bit of work done to our driveway throughout the year as well, which meant that the driveway, this was in the second half of the year really, we cleared all our pots that we had on the front driveway where we were growing fruits and vegetables in pots out on the front. We cleared those out, moved them out the back. And I felt the kitchen garden just looked a little bit like Steptoe's garden, that it was full of junk and everything, which was a real struggle. Now, the driveway did take quite a few weeks longer than it was expected because we ran into lots of problems, blocked drains and broken drains and things like that. That meant that the job took a lot longer, but it was certainly worth it. But it did take a while to get back into the frame that I wanted to be out in the kitchen garden. As I said, it wasn't until I was looking back at some photos throughout the year that I realised where we came from. And in fact, one of the things that I want to say is constantly take a photo of your allotment, of your kitchen garden, first of every month. It just gives you something to look at throughout the year and see where you came from and what you have achieved. Really has helped. One of the other things that we've done in the kitchen garden was straw bale gardening. Now obviously we've done this on the allotment as well, but straw bale gardening has been a real success again. I've done straw bale gardening in the past, and although it worked, I didn't feel it was as good as I was expected. What I learned with straw bale gardening is it was about the conditioning phase. It was about getting the straw bale conditioned to really work. What we had to do was add a high nitrogen fertiliser to the straw bales to really condition it. In the past I used chicken manure pellets. They weren't high enough nitrogen. What we needed was something called urea, which we bought from Amazon, and we sprinkled that on a course of 2 weeks, every other day sort of thing. And it worked. The straw bales warmed up. We grew some fantastic squash plants in the straw bales. It worked really well. And the area where I placed it, it was a edge of my garden. It was a difficult area. So the straw bales actually worked at reducing the weeds in that area as well. So win. It's definitely something I'm going to be doing more of. One of the biggest challenges that I wanted to set for 2025 was whether we could grow more food from stuff that we buy from a supermarket. And it worked. Quite a few things we managed to do. Now, sweet potatoes is the one that failed. I've tried several times to try and grow slips from sweet potatoes, but I never seem to be able to do that. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I'm going to keep trying. The idea being you take a sweet potato, you suspend it in a bit of water, and eventually it grows a shoot. You then take that shoot, you plant it up, and hopefully it ends up growing into a sweet potato plant. I've struggled with doing that. But other areas that I've managed to grow food from, supermarket stuff. Ginger, which I grow ginger anyway, but I just took a knob of ginger, planted it in some soil, kept it somewhere warm, and pretty soon it grew. Cardamom seeds and spice seeds, that's worked quite well as well. Salad leaves and herbs, of course, we expect to be able to grow those. And even potatoes, managed to grow some potatoes from potatoes bought from a supermarket. And it was garlic as well, which also I've done for a couple of years now. It works really well. The trouble, however, is there is a risk of spreading disease. Now, I'm no scientist, and I can't say that I've noticed it myself. And the point that I wanted to test with this theory was whether we could grow food from stuff we buy in a supermarket. Let's say the garden centres all suddenly closed down overnight and we couldn't get any of our usual supplies. Could we go to a supermarket and get something that we could grow food from? The answer is yes, we managed that. Now, of course, we've spoken about the hot bin that we've been experimenting with, and that has been another success. We've produced a lot more compost that we're using in the vegetable gardens. That really is paying off. The other highlight throughout this year has of course been the chickens. We've got 5 chickens now. We started off the year with 4. Unfortunately, one of them did pass away. Bear, my oldest chicken, had her for nearly 10 years. So she was an old bird. Let's be honest, she wasn't a young, sprightly bird, but she was my first chicken as well, one of my first chickens. And it was sad to lose her, of course, but of course it was her time. However, we did get 2 more chickens, and they have started laying in the last few weeks some beautiful eggs. We've got the blue eggs that started about a month or 2 ago, and then about a month ago the other one, these beautiful green eggs as well. We're getting 4 eggs a day at the moment, so we're getting a lot of eggs, as I'm sure you can imagine, but we really do enjoy all these eggs nonetheless. Other things that we've been really successful with in growing here in the kitchen garden: garlic. Increased the amount of garlic that we have been growing, and we've managed to store more garlic by growing it here at home as well. The storage has worked incredibly better. I think because I've been able to get it out of the soil a little bit earlier, it's not started to go to seed. We've grown more brassicas here at home. We've grown more chard. We've even grown radicchio and beetroot, and I'm just looking around the garden now. It's still producing food. Here we are, literally at the end of the year. We're in winter, and there's still so much food here in this kitchen garden that we won't go hungry for a very, very long time. And that for me makes me very, very happy. Now, one of the other big changes that happened in the kitchen garden over 2025 was the shed. I started off with my original shed that I bought for about £400 10 years ago. I put it up and it was a cheap shed. It never really got its maximum potential, but this year I invested with a bit of inheritance that I got in a shed that I bought from a company called Power Sheds, and it's a shed come greenhouse, glass on the front, lets in plenty of light, and we're using that for our propagation shed. Now, I'm really happy with that shed, and it's really coming to its own at this time of year. It's nice and cold outside, as I'm sure you can imagine, but I run in my shed and we managed to get on and sow a few seeds quite nicely in the area. Everything's set up in there. It just works, and best of all, the shed looks really cool. Huge amount of glass on the front has made it worthwhile. Shelves on the inside, I just love it, and that has been one of the biggest changes, apart from the driveway, that has gone on here at the Veg Grower Podcast kitchen garden. What's changed in your kitchen garden throughout 2025? Let me know. Right, I am now going to head on down to the allotment. In the meantime, let's find out what's been going on in the Supporters Club this week. Well, I'm just jumping in at this point of the podcast. You know what's coming. I'm going to ask, if you are enjoying this podcast, then please leave a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it means well to us, and it helps us get found by more people who might also want to know more about how to grow their own food. But not only that, we also run the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club in order to keep this podcast running. And for just £5 a month, you could be a member too. By being a member, you get access to extra behind-the-scenes podcasts that give you a bit of an idea of what's going on here at the Veg Grower Podcast HQ. And added to that, once a month, you will also receive our seed pack. That seed pack contains a collection of seeds that I have carefully chosen to be sown in that very month. No matter where you are in the UK, those seeds can be sown. Included as well is a copy of our mini newspaper. That mini newspaper gives you a few instructions on how to grow those seeds, and it also gives you a few ideas on a few tasks that you can do throughout that month as well. Details on this at the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. But as an example of what we would be sowing, so over the last week, I've already mentioned it actually, we have been sowing some onion seeds. These were sown on Boxing Day, the traditional day for sowing onion seeds for exhibition. They were included in December's pack, but we're moving on to January's now. and it's going to be quite an exciting month. So once again, if that sounds like something you would be interested in, then please head to the website, theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Right, back to the gardening. Well, I'm down on the allotment now. It is bitterly cold. Not frozen, just bitterly cold. And my hands feel like huge ice blocks. But I've visited the allotment. Obviously, between Christmas and New Year, it is really difficult to get to the allotment as much as I would like. I'm lucky enough I'm not working this year between Christmas and New Year, so visiting the allotment is high on my agenda. But of course, we've got family, we've got friends, we've got short days, we've got 1,000,001 things going on. So when I visit the allotment, it's a case that I just run in, do a bit of weeding, do a bit of harvesting, do what I can, but try and make the most of it nonetheless. But what I want to talk about here today is, like I've just done down in the kitchen garden, is sort of evaluating the 2025 season. Now, when I started 2025, the plan on this allotment was to make it a really highly productive, beautiful looking allotment full of lots and lots of food. Pretty much the plan that we plan to do every single year. Now, my allotment for me is somewhere that we try and grow a lot of our staples. Things like potatoes, the brassicas, beans, carrots, onions, things that basically are able to go in the soil and look after themselves. Unlike the kitchen garden, where I can tend to the kitchen garden on a daily basis, the allotment is not so easy to get down here every single day. And this is particularly relevant this year because I did change my job at the beginning of this year. My previous job, I was able to visit the allotment every single day on my way home from work. But my current job, I can still visit the allotment a little bit, but it's not as easy anymore. Reason being is I work a little bit longer days and I need to get home, particularly on Wednesdays when I have a camera club that I'm part of. I need to go and get home and rush out to do. So I'm not visiting the allotment on a daily basis as much as I used to be able to do. However, one of the biggest things that I've learned this year has been the use of the straw mulch. I've spoken about using the straw mulch so much throughout this year that I almost feel like I'm banging the tune too much. But it has really paid dividends this year. Now, of course, I'm a big believer that we mulch as much as we possibly can. I've always mulched, but on the allotment, it's very difficult to use my preferred mulch, which is, of course, compost, just purely because we struggle to produce enough of it. We try, and we will always try. This year we've actually produced a lot of compost, but I'll get into that in a moment. But in order to produce enough compost, I decided that I wanted to try and use straw. The reason being, a bale of straw costs me £3.50. And that was enough to cover 1.5 beds. If I was to pay the same in compost, we would be looking at about £30. So it was a huge cost saving in using the straw mulch. And it's certainly something I'm going to continue using. Because of that, I've actually grown some of the best potatoes and many other crops. But my particular delight has been the potatoes this year. We've produced lots of potatoes, which, considering it's been a dry year, is pretty good. But we produced a lot of potatoes. We've produced some good sized potatoes, all of which have gone down really well in our household. Lots of potato meals. So I will be continuing to use this straw mulch over the coming years where I need to. Ultimately, making compost is our goal, and using compost is our goal. Now, this brings me on to something I mentioned earlier about compost. I, of course, have built some rather large bins over the last couple of years using corrugated iron, and they have produced a ton of compost. Now, because they are big compost bins, all I do is I fill them up with compost material throughout the year, and I just leave it to rot down, leave it to turn into compost. Nothing difficult about that, as I'm sure you can imagine. But the fact I now have 2 of these large corrugated iron compost bins, which get filled with loads of compost material, plus my compost bin that I've made out of fridge doors, I actually do think we are on track to produce most of our compost to cover our beds. Now, this is going to be a good sign, because if I can produce enough compost here, it really does save a lot of money, and it means that we can continue being very productive and being more and more self-sufficient. We don't need to import any compost or even manure to make our allotment as self-sufficient as we can. So the real secret here is that large compost bins, fill it up as much as we possibly can, and don't use that compost for a year before we barrow it around. It made such a huge difference. And of course the straw helped with that, because we've been using the straw to mulch our beds instead of compost. So really happy with the things that are going on here. Now, in terms of food, it has been a bit of a struggle this year because it was so dry. But we have produced all of our needs in terms of vegetables between here and the kitchen garden. For me, yes, it was a dry year. We had very little rain, but the mulch helped with that. Things like parsnips did struggle to really get going, but once they were going, we actually have produced some really lovely parsnips that we had on our Christmas dinner. And many of our other crops have actually thrived. I mentioned potatoes, but tomatoes, chilies, aubergines, peppers, cabbages, members of our brassica family have all thrived. The plants that really struggled this year, however, on the allotment was our beans and our peas. Now, I think a lot of this is down to the fact that we didn't spread enough compost in the beds that they are growing in, which is a lesson that we're going to be learning throughout 2026. I now am on the mission to try and spread a lot of compost that we have in our compost bins in order to add plenty of organic matter to the soil, to really get the soil in a good state. It can easily be done. We can certainly do it. We can make 2026 an even more productive year. And I actually do believe that if we have plenty of compost material, if we get another dry year, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. It's just a case that we've got to add plenty of compost to our beds to really get them going. We can do it. We can certainly do it. Now, we've always had problem areas on the allotment, certain areas that have been a little bit harder to keep tidy, and I keep trying to focus on these throughout the winter years. Where I border with my neighbours who has got a deserted allotment, an overgrown allotment, it is still incredibly difficult. I'm looking at it right now, and my currant bushes are just covered with these huge brambles from my neighbours, which really do need cutting down. In fact, it's going to be something we need to do over the coming weeks. But I really need people on that plot to cut it down and get on top of it, which would really help us out in a big way. Other problem areas around my gooseberries and my other perennial trees. But we are making some of these areas much easier to look after and look a lot better. In particular, the area I spoke about just a couple of weeks ago, where I planted out an espalier tree and created a fence out of an espalier tree. That is going to be a big thing throughout 2026 that we are going to see. Now, again, I'm hoping 2026 we're going to get an even more productive year. We're going to produce even more food on the allotment. We're going to be able to get even more productive. So, I invite you, as always, to join me on this journey as we continue on throughout the year, growing as much food as we possibly can. Well, with that, it's time now to head on home. But in the meantime, let's find out what's going on in the kitchen this week.
Chopping all the veggies, sizzle in the air. Chef's got with the magic, smells are everywhere. Water starts to boil, onions hit the pan. Recipe of the week, let the feast begin. Cooking with Chef Scott, flavors come alive. Tune in every week for a tasty bite.
Well, this week's recipe is a way of using some of that leftover Christmas dinner. I know, you're probably not thinking about Christmas dinner now. We're moving on to New Year's Day. But in my household, we really do not like wasting anything, in particular food. We try to get as many meals out of all the food that we grow as we possibly can. And that includes our leftover Christmas dinner, because we like to turn that every year into good old Bubble and Squeak. Now, if you've not heard of Bubble and Squeak before, it is delicious. It's a great way to use up some leftover vegetables. What we do is we take our leftover roast potatoes and we give them a very light mashing, nothing too serious because we just want them lightly mashed. We then take any leftover vegetables, we chop them up, and then we mix that into a bowl with the potatoes. We then take a frying pan with a little bit of oil, heat it up, and add in one chopped onion. We just fry that gently until the onions are nice and soft. We then add a couple of cloves of garlic, give it a good stir, cook it for another couple of minutes before adding the potato and vegetables. When we add the potato and vegetables, we do like to push it down so that it really is compact in the pan. Of course, add a bit of seasoning as well, doesn't go amiss. We then cook that in the frying pan for a couple of minutes until it is nice and crispy. I like to finish it off in the grill as well. Ideally, we would turn it over in the frying pan, but that's not so easy with this particular recipe. But it is basically just frying up that leftover vegetables. Now, this is a lovely, delicious breakfast served with an egg. Bit of brown sauce doesn't go amiss as well. But it's also one that when we make it, my wife and I will have some and we'll keep some in the freezer just for another day as well. Absolutely delicious. Go give it a go. The recipe is, of course, on the website, theveggrowerpodcast.co.uk. Well, I'm in the podding shed now, and I think it's time now to talk about one of the big missions that I try and do every year. And that mission is to try and grow £5,000 worth of food. Now, I try and keep track of this throughout the year. Unfortunately, I've had website troubles, but it's slowed things down and caused a few issues. So I haven't been able to share this on the website with the weekly harvest report. But once we get that fixed and the website moving nicely, we're hoping we'll be able to bring that back. But what I like to do is I go throughout the year. Every time I harvest some food, I weigh it and I keep track of it. And I work out how much it would be worth if we were to buy it from a supermarket. I didn't quite make £5,000 this year, which £5,000 is quite ambitious. You imagine saving £5,000 off your shopping bill. It is quite ambitious, don't get me wrong. But we were only £500 short. So I don't think we were too far from it. We are going to try, of course, again next year to see if we can do better. But £4,500 worth of food is still pretty good. Now, of course, we have chickens, which does make up for quite a few of this of a certain value. But the real heroes this year have been things like the tomatoes, because tomatoes have been never ending. It's been a really, really good year for all fruits for that matter. Tomatoes, chilies, aubergines, peppers, cucumbers, red currants, black currants, white currants, you name it, all the fruits that you can think of. It has been a really, really good year to produce lots of fruit. And there's been a lot of value in that. A lot of value in that. But we can do better. We can certainly do better. Now, it would have been good if we had got some beans. We were a little low on beans and peas this year compared to past years, but I don't mind that. I think the fruit has made up for it. So £4,500 worth of food is still pretty impressive, and I'm pretty happy with that. Did you work out how much food you've harvested this year and how much it is worth? Please do let me know. But as I wrap up for the year, pack this podcast away for the year, we will of course be back in 2026 where we're going to keep trying to improve. We're going to keep trying to do better. But I want to wrap up with some of the comments that I've actually received over this last week. First of all, on Spotify, Free Cake. Happy Christmas and enjoy all those lovely veg. We certainly did enjoy all those lovely veg. I want to thank everybody who has also left a comment on Spotify or iTunes or anything like that, because it really does help. I read them out on a weekly basis because it seems to encourage people to leave more. But it really does help us in a big way, because it really does help us get found by more people. It gets the algorithms working, which anybody who's into content creating will know that is such an important thing. We've also had a comment over on Podbean from a Caro Trike. Caro Trike says, is your apple tree still producing fruit even though it has developed a lean? The reason I ask is because if you train branches, I have heard that a 45-degree angle is better for fruit production. Unless it's lying on the ground, you may not need to worry. Love the podcast. Well, yes, my apple tree did continue to produce fruit, even though it was laying at a more than 45-degree angle. It was virtually on the ground. My issue with it wasn't so much that it was leaning. It did mean it needed a bit of production, a bit of pruning to keep it in shape. But it was the fact that it was pretty unsecure in the ground, and the way it was leaning meant it was difficult to get around it. So now we've got it back up straight. Hopefully it's going to stay straight as well. It's given me a bit of a scope of what's going on in the future, and hopefully it would just be as productive. But that does bring me on to something I'm thinking of doing but in the home garden anyway, of cordons, which are just single columnar apple trees, pear trees or something like that you would grow at a 45-degree angle or similar, and grow lots of them in a close area in order to produce fruit. So it is true, you can grow trees at an angle and they can be very, very productive. But you do need the right tree and you do need the right pruning. I would really love it if anybody out there could leave us a rate and review on your podcast provider. It only takes you a few seconds, but it means the world to us. Also, if you've enjoyed this podcast, then please consider becoming a member of the Veg Grower Podcast Supporters Club. Details on that at the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk. While you're on our website, you can of course leave a comment on the bottom of a blog post, or you can leave us a voicemail using our SpeakPipe service. Alternatively, you can email me, Richard at the veggrowerpodcast.co.uk, and you can also find me on social media. Well, with that, it is time to say goodbye to 2025. I hope you all have a really good New Year's, whatever you may be doing, and I will see you again in 2026. Until next time, please take care.